Hi everyone, hope everyone's doing well. Just wanted to make a new video here. It's been quite a while since I've done the last one. In that meantime, my health has been very good. I've had no issues with my ITP or thrombocytopenia. I've had good platelet count, so hence why here we are quite a while later after my last video. But unfortunately I've had a crash recently, so I just wanted to update some interesting developments with that. I do want to say, first of all, though, a disclaimer that obviously you should be speaking with your hematologist or your doctor if you're thinking of making any changes or doing anything in terms of things that might change with your current ITP or thrombocytopenia in terms of treatment. So they're always the ones to consult with. What I'm sharing here is my experience, so please take that into account. So I have some notes here. On April 6th, my blood count was at 139. My range is typically between 180 and 200. However, in the last, I'd say, year and a half or two, my numbers have been between 120 and 150 for some reason, and I felt okay, so that's been okay. I try to do blood tests usually once a month or sometimes every 2 weeks. After April 6th, when my numbers are at 139, they had been coming down a little bit just prior to that, so I got busy with work. Unfortunately, I should have been going for blood tests weekly at that point just to double check that things were going okay, but I didn't get a blood test until April 21st. The night before, on the 8th, I saw I had some spots on the top of my feet, which I thought perhaps was purpura or petechiae, and so I went in for a blood test the next morning. I took the day off of work too. It had been a stressful week with work and a couple other things. And so that morning took a blood test on April 9th. It was a Friday. That evening I got a call from the hospital here in Vancouver where I live, and the hematologist said you should get on your medication as soon as possible or come down to the hospital. That way you can get IVIG and dexamethasone, the steroid which I take typically. I had asked her, however, I was like, would it be okay if I spent an extra day or two seeing if I can get my numbers up naturally with rest and diet and supplements? And she recommended no. She's like, you should get on your dexamethasone immediately and your steroids if you're going to do so at home, or come into the hospital right away. You shouldn't wait. Obviously, being at 9 is below 20, which is a dangerous threshold because you can have internal bleeding and you wouldn't know, and that's life-threatening, so very dangerous. At the same token, in the past I've had numbers as down as 2 or even 3, and that's initially when this all started for me in July 2016. So at that time, obviously, it was quite scary. I didn't think twice. I went right away into the hospital and got IVIG and dexamethasone. If numbers were starting to decline, let's say they were between 70 and 30. At that point, I would take my dexamethasone prescription which I have here at home. I would do the dexamethasone, and typically I would respond. And then within a week, my numbers would start coming up. I would take time off of work and just rest, sleep, eat, make sure I don't have any pressures or anything like that in my life, because I believe that seems to have some impact. But anyways, like I mentioned, April 21st, I had a count of 9 for my blood test. I thought it over right away in terms of taking dexamethasone at home, my steroids, or if I should just go to the hospital right away. And I thought, well, you know what, I'm gonna give it 2 extra days, and I'm gonna go for a blood test on Monday morning, which would have been the 24th. And immediately I started to eat certain foods and drink certain foods, supplements, resting. I implemented some other things, meditation, etc., which I'm going to detail here in the next little bit, and that seemed to help. When I went in on the Monday, my numbers would come up to 31. Sorry, so at 31 from 9. And so at that point I was like, wow, okay, I'm somewhat out of that danger zone of 20, which I was relieved and thankful for. And I continued with the things that I was on and that I was trying to implement. And the next blood test was April 27, and my numbers went to 93, which was a huge relief, and also, you know, kind of a big win for me, obviously, because I'd always wanted to do things naturally if I could. Obviously, there's consequences with steroids, especially over long-term use. And being in the hospital, obviously that experience is always hard on one's body and mind and spirit. So more so recently, I've been trying to do alternative natural remedies if I could. Now, I will say, prior to talking about my experience with the things that I was doing, that with the disclaimer, obviously you should be consulting with your hematologist or your doctor about your treatment with ITP and thrombocytopenia. If there's going to be obviously any changes in your treatment, you should discuss them with your doctor. That's prudent, and you should do that with a professional. Now, what I'm going to explain is my experience. So when I did get that blood test for 9 platelet count, obviously it was frightening, but nonetheless, I had naturally brought up my numbers in previous years, not when they were that low. This is the first time they were ever that low. Usually if they were starting to come down below 100, I would see a decline, typically slowly. Like my regular numbers are 180 to 200, and then once my numbers start declining, 140, 120, 110, 90, that's when I try to be more aggressive in terms of supplements, making sure I'm eating and drinking certain items, and I'm avoiding other items perhaps that are anticoagulants, that I'm sleeping well, that I'm meditating. I also try to take some time off of work if that's possible for myself. I find that typically it helps to de-stress. One of the other things that I did here during the week, once I hit 9, I'm like, okay, I gotta naturally get this up. I'm gonna start listing them to you. So one of the first things I did, I started drinking more goat's milk, so more dairy. So this is some goat's milk that I buy here at my local Safeway. Dairy is a big part from what I've read and my experience in the last couple of years. And when my numbers came down last week, prior to, my diet wasn't very good. I wasn't eating very much during that week. I was always somewhat stressed with work, always rushing, and so I had a poor week in terms of eating, as well as stress and fatigue. So immediately I started drinking more goat's milk. I did that about 3 times a day, like a nice good glass. I find the goat's milk is more digestible for me, so I did that. I have notes here. The other thing I wanted to mention too is I journal. I have a journal, and I do daily entries in terms of what I eat for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner, snacks, and what I do during the day, how I slept that night, when I go to the washroom, any type of little things that are clues perhaps. I write them down, weather, things like that, and I look over them. So when I have blood tests, I can look at, oh, what happened over the last 2 weeks or a week or this past month, and those give me clues, and that's what's given me clues up till this point. So I highly recommend it. Please journal if you have ITP and you're changing things up sometimes with diet or what's happening in your life, weather, things like that, supplementation. Write it down. That way you can go back and look and see, like, wow, okay, my numbers were excellent during this time, or they slipped during this time and they started to drop during this time, and you can look and see, what was I eating, what was I doing, what was happening in my life, what the weather was like, different little things like that can give you clues. Obviously we don't know, because ITP is idiopathic, hence the I, and so nonetheless these are clues. So journaling, definitely recommend it. Apart from that, I was also taking supplements. One of the supplements I take is a multi-mineral, vitamin called EMP Power Plus by a company called True Hope. You take 2 in the morning and then 2 at lunch. And so I did that immediately as of once I got the news about my blood test being at 9. Right away it was 2 in the morning, 2 at lunch. It is a little bit more of an expensive supplement, so you will be spending a little bit more money for it. I think here in Canada it's close to $70 Canadian, but it's well worth it. It has a full range of all the minerals, all the electrolytes, all the vitamins, and so when I went to go see a naturopath who recommended it for me, he said essentially we're going to cover any areas that there might be some deficiencies. So hence why we're going to do that. And that first year that I did that, I had very good results, and I didn't have crashes all year. So that was a tip off for me that I think this supplementation works for me, and so I wanted to share that. I also had an electrolyte beverage that first day on the Saturday. Uh, it's a 1 liter called Pedialyte by Abbott Lab. I buy it at my local pharmacy. It helps with dehydration and it has all the electrolytes. So that's in case you have an electrolyte imbalance. Um, I take that, and in the past, I've had numbers come up with that issue by taking this because it tackles dehydration. So if you're dehydrated, Pedialyte is what you'd want to take to help with that in case that's a major impact on platelet count being low. I take that in the mix. Now, obviously, there's various things, as you're going to hear, that I did over this past week to help my platelets come up. So I don't know what specific, if it's 1 or 2 items, or if it's all of it combined. So, you know, in a way, I kind of threw the kitchen sink at it. I'm not sure. When this combination is put together, it seems to help me. So that's what I'm sharing. I was also having orange juice daily. I was having like 2 glasses. I did the Tropicana with pulp here, lots of pulp. I did that twice a day, nice tall glass. That helps with your vitamin C and with your folate. And that seems to help. So I did that all week as well, and I think was a factor that helped to bring up my platelet count. The other things that I also did that I think they're important, I also ate lots of Brussels sprouts, and I ate lots of broccoli every day. And I know that sounds kind of gross and obviously not my favorite food, but nonetheless, the vitamin K in that is very important. And so I did that for breakfast and for lunch. Obviously, breakfast wasn't fun, but nonetheless, the vitamin K, I think, along with the calcium together, the vitamin K tells the calcium to get in your bones. And it's in your bones, in your bone marrow, where the platelets are produced. So I think that might be a factor somewhere in there. So I eat lots of greens that have vitamin K. I also have a shake in the morning that's a protein with greens. And that also helps, I believe, to make sure I have a higher vitamin K count during the day that I need, because obviously vitamin K helps for coagulation, which is platelet aggregation, which is clotting, which is essentially the issue with ITP. In the morning, I also eat turkey and I eat chicken, or either or, white meat, poultry. For some reason, that's also been linked with in the morning. It helps protein. It's great protein to have in the morning, and I think for me it's also helped. So I wanted to share that. I ate that every day that weekend when my platelets started at 9, and on the Monday I had it at 31, as well as up to the Friday when my numbers were up to 93 on April 27th. So that week I had lots of poultry. It was both turkey and chicken, like every morning, along with my protein shake that had greens in it, as well as my multivitamin, multi-mineral that I would take would be 2. Plus I would also have goat's milk, plenty of goat's milk that morning, and I'd have some orange juice. Now the other things I also want to recommend that help me during the week for my numbers to come up naturally from 9, I turned off my smartphone, my TV, and laptops at night and throughout the day. I immediately took time off at work. I'm fortunate enough that where at work they understand my situation, and I was able to take time off of work on the Friday when I went in for my numbers. When I thought maybe I had petechiae on my feet, purpura, I took the Friday off, and I told them immediately that I would be taking the rest of the week off. So I took that week off from the 23rd right up to the 27th. I took it all off. So I slept in every morning. I went to bed before 10 o'clock. In the evenings, I didn't do any laptop, any smartphone, any type of TV. I just read. I read at night, so it was just basically analog type of nights, calm, not worrying about messages, news, sports, financial, nothing. So the digital, I turned that off pretty much all week. I haven't looked at it. And I think that's also helped to be calm. A part of also being calm, I think, is I meditated every day or every second day. But I tried to meditate almost daily, 25 minutes. I basically close my eyes. I breathe in for 7 seconds. Sorry, I breathe in for 4 seconds, hold my breath for 7 seconds, and then exhale for 8 seconds, and then I say a word, and typically it's peace. And then you redo the sequence again, and I'll do that for 20 to 25 minutes, once or twice a day. So again, it's meditating by closing your eyes, breathing in for 4 seconds, holding your breath for 7 seconds, and then exhaling for 8 seconds, and then saying a word, and mine is peace. And then doing that, like I said, 20 to 25 minutes, once a day. And with that, it helps, I find, for myself to calm me down, but also to have oxygen enter your body. I find that typically throughout the day with the stress, especially looking at screens and news and things that are happening fast, your breathing becomes very shallow. So your breath isn't deep. It doesn't go down into your belly. Typically, relaxation isn't very many breaths in a minute because you're relaxed. But when one is uptight, typically you have many breaths in a minute, and the breath comes up higher in your lungs. But when you're relaxed, it comes a lot lower, and it goes down almost to the base of your stomach. So you want to have a relaxed breathing, and the meditation helps with that. And I find overall when I do meditate, my numbers are a lot better. So that's something I also did all throughout the week for my numbers to increase naturally, and I find overall helps. I'm just going to read my notes here if there's anything else. Also during the week here, I was fortunate enough that the sun peeked out finally here in Vancouver, and so I have a patio, which I'm sitting now, and I sunbathed. I sunbathed on, I think it was 4 days of that week, just in my shorts, taking sun, where the sun hit my torso and my back and my legs, my feet, my arms, my face, and I sat out here and I read for several hours. That was in the afternoon, typically after 2 o'clock, right up until about 4 or 5, until it was time for dinner. And then I felt that's also important because it's vitamin D, and you need vitamin D as well for helping, I think, essentially for one's platelet count. Vitamin D is very important. That was another thing that one of the naturopaths in the last couple of years also discussed with me and gave me supplementation for vitamin D. For me, I was taking vitamin D for almost a year when I first spoke with him. I believe that would have been in 2019 that I had seen him. And I had a very good year with that. And I did some more reading on it, and vitamin D is important in that it mimics steroids, essentially. It's a natural steroid. And here we are taking dexamethasone and prednisone when our numbers go down, and essentially vitamin D, the sun, has that same impact. So if one is able to get sun, that's vitamin D, and that's very important since we don't produce it internally. So that's another thing that I also did all week. You can also supplement. I do have supplements that I take occasionally too. That's a vitamin D and K2 supplement together. Typically when they're done together, that's the ideal one if you are going to take a vitamin D and K2 supplement. They need to be together because that's how they're able to process in one's body. Rather than having them alone, they don't process as successfully when they're together. They need to be together for the body to absorb it. So something to keep in mind. I also, actually this week too, looking at my notes, I also ate bone marrow. And so that's essentially like soup bones that you can buy at your local grocery or your butcher, and it has the marrow inside. And what I would do is I would steam it, and then I would eat the marrow inside the bone. And I did that on, I think it was 3 different nights. And essentially they say that when you eat, like for example, beef liver or any other type of organs, that benefits the organ specifically. And so with platelets coming out of the bone marrow where they're created, eating bone marrow would essentially directly help. And so I've been doing that when I do have numbers come down, or occasionally just to kind of assist with that. And so I did that on 3 occasions this week too, when my numbers came up substantially. So another factor there that I believe helped. The other thing, after taking a look at my journal, I journal every day, by the way, which I highly recommend to all those with ITP or thrombocytopenia. Get a daily journal and write breakfast, lunch, dinner, all the things that you ate. including supplements. If you're having snacks throughout the day, what the day looks like too is it is a hot day, you didn't sleep well when you're going to the bathroom for 1 and 2, is it good, bad, how are things? If there's other events throughout the day too, you were social, or you had success with something, or something got you down, little things to just note in there. You don't have to do everything, but I find the journal helps a lot, so you can look back afterwards when you have blood tests or you have crashes with ITP, and there might be some clues in there. And for me, I know that's worked. I've taken a look at those things that have come up in my journal, and they've helped. And I've able to pinpoint, like, oh, you know what, during this time, I usually find when I'm taking this, or I'm not doing this, or I'm implementing this, my numbers are showing, improvement, or they're coming down. And so you get a bit of an idea. Those are clues. So I highly recommend that. Now, another thing, as I mentioned in my journaling recently, during all this episode here this past month, I noticed that my numbers came up quite a bit when I went from 7 to, I came up from 9 on April 21st to 93 on April 27th. I was eating a fair bit. So for me, it works that I need to be eating 3 square meals a day, and I need to be snacking as well, and hydrating and drinking juice and goat's milk regularly, and vegetables and protein and carbs, and just eating a lot more throughout the day and throughout several days, because that helps to nourish the body, and that helps for all the processes, all the things that need to happen. And I know for me, when I'm looking at my journal, eating more is important. So that's something also too, I think, to consider for those with ITP and thrombocytopenia. Taking a look to make sure that one's having good meals all throughout the day, not skipping meals, not skipping snacks, but really adding a lot of nutrition to your body all throughout the day and throughout the week, all the time. It's very important. Like, really, it's our fuel for everything, including platelet production. Now, the other thing too, I did spend social time. I think it's important to be, obviously with loved ones. I find the more time I spend with loved ones too, I find my platelets are usually good. And I think this is perhaps something that one might overlook, obviously, with one's busy schedule and everything, but it's important. I've been spending time with loved ones all throughout the week, pretty much every evening after I'm done the day, just to hang out and talk and chat and see how everyone's doing, and to laugh and catch up and have social time. I think those times also benefit one's health. So something that shouldn't be underestimated, and something that, being with loved ones, I think there's a sense of comfort and protection. And I don't think we should underestimate how that also impacts our health and even producing platelets. So anyways, that's something also too that I've added all throughout the week, and that was daily for me too, in the evenings. The other thing too that I added recently too that I haven't in the past, I added gelatin. Gelatin is basically like Jello, but obviously without the flavorings or the sugar. It's a pork product, and it's essentially from boiling the bones, and you get essentially the collagen that's left and other elements within the bones, which I think there also has to be within there too, good nutrition for platelet production and blood production. From the things that I was reading online, it helps for blood production and blood volume. So this is something too that I've added to my diet recently, and more so this week here. So the exact impact I'm not sure, but it's something that I've added more recently, and I think that I've helped. So I wanted to include that today. And all you do is like, I believe it's 1 packet with really boiling water. I think it's like half a liter, and it sets just like Jello. And I would have a couple spoonfuls in a day, maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 spoonfuls after a meal, kind of like regular Jello. It's transparent, so it doesn't have any flavor. I get the unflavored kind, and it's Knox. Knox is the brand for that one there. It's fairly inexpensive too. I think it's under $10 Canadian. So I've been having that all week too. Once I would finish, I would cook another one and put it in the fridge, and then it sets, and you have that with every after a meal, whether it's lunch or dinner. And for me, I found it fun. I always like Jello, so something too that helps, I think. So I wanted to add that as well. So again, just to summarize, this week on the Friday, 21st, my platelet count came down to 9 at that blood test, which was really low, under that 20 which is obviously dangerous for internal bleeding. I essentially waited out a couple days, sleeping as much as I could, eating, which is very important in terms of the things I just discussed, and then also avoiding certain things, which I'll discuss as well here in a moment. And then my blood test on April 24th, on the Monday, came to 31, so it increased, got me out of that 20 range, which is that dangerous range. And then by the Friday, April 27th, I went for another blood test after continuing to do those things daily. My numbers were at 93, which is fantastic. So I had another blood test this morning. I still haven't had results, but we'll go take a look at that this evening to see what it is. Hopefully it's increased. I've continued with the same schedule and the same eating and sleeping and supplementation. The other thing, actually, I should also recommend is I take a probiotic by Renew Life. It's a 80 billion. There's also another one for 100 billion bacteria strain for the probiotic. And I also take that usually in the afternoon. I take that with yogurt. I did eat quite a bit of yogurt all throughout the week, every day, typically to snack in between lunch and dinner. And I would conclude it with a probiotic. It's the Renew Life probiotic. Is you can buy, I think it's quantity of 15 or for 30 days. I bought the 30 days, and you just have one probiotic pill with a snack with food, essentially, and that's what I have been doing. It is a little more expensive as well. I think it's around that $70 range Canadian, but in previous years I had been taking it for months and months, and that helped also quite a bit. So I find when my numbers come down, I go to probiotics, and then I also go to my multi-mineral, multivitamin, like I showed you earlier, the True Hope EMP Power Plus. That I find also helps to get my numbers up. It's one of the factors. It seems to potentially bring up any deficiency I might have in the minerals and the vitamins in my body. I think that's mostly it. Anyways, it was quite the experience this week. I'd never known personally that I would be able to bring up my numbers that low to that high a number within a week. Essentially, it's 10x. I went from 9 to 93 in a week, from one Friday to the next. It took a lot of discipline, obviously, in terms of making sure I was eating the things I was eating, taking the supplementation I had to take, resting as much as I could, not looking at my smartphone, not looking at my laptop, not looking at TV, and just being calm, resting, meditating, drinking a lot of goat's milk. I drank a lot of goat's milk, like 3 glasses every day, all the time, really putting that raw material into my body, because dairy is important. I feel, from my experience, from what I'm seeing with ITP and my increases in platelets, when I have lots of dairy, that seems to help, specifically goat's milk and yogurt. That's essentially, I think, the raw materials for platelets, and from what I'm reading, it's very important, and I see it in my numbers. So that's one thing where you're drinking a lot of goat's milk. I had a lot of Brussels sprouts and broccoli every day, like twice a day, and I think that also seems to help with the vitamin K necessities so that your blood coagulates. Now, actually, talking about coagulation, I also want to talk about some of the things I've taken out of my diet, which if one also does some research on anticoagulants, you'll see that there are certain things that break up platelets and don't make them stick together and adhere, which is what one with ITP really needs. One needs platelets to aggregate, to coagulate. So anticoagulants are things such as aspirin, garlic, molasses. These are things that I avoid. I do not eat them. I try not to include them in my diet because they do the opposite of what I need in terms of what vitamin K2 does, which is to create clotting, create coagulation. They do the opposite. They slow the coagulation of platelets. So again, that was garlic, aspirin, black molasses, cherries. Some of the berries, I don't eat as much as those, even though they're full of really great things for you in terms of antioxidants and vitamin C, etc. But you can get those things from other fruits and vegetables that are not anticoagulants. I do not drink alcohol, no alcohol of any kind. That seems to be an anticoagulant. So unfortunately, I used to enjoy the odd wine or spirit, but not anymore. And since then, my health's improved, so I don't touch it. There's a whole list. If you look up anticoagulants, I would recommend it. You'll see some things that you need to cut out of your diet, and you'll see, I think personally, after the fact, you'll see some improvement in your numbers potentially, or in your health in general, by taking out these anticoagulant fruits and food. If you have ITP. Obviously, if you do not have ITP or thrombocytopenia, those are healthy for you and you should eat them. But if you have ITP and problems with platelets and coagulation, you need to avoid them for now. Also, I would recommend to those watching with ITP and thrombocytopenia, spring water. I cut out any type of tap water, filtered water from the tap. You do not want to be drinking any of that, because unfortunately we don't know what's in there in terms of chlorine, fluoride, other treated chemicals in there. So you want spring water that you purchase your local grocery store. As you know, that's typically been filtered, but it also has different minerals in them too, and that's healthy for you. Healthy water in your body, as you know, the body is about 2/3 of your body is water. So with your body being 2/3 of water, you want to make sure that's high quality water. So I'd also include that too. If anyone with ITP, thrombocytopenia, that's important. Now anticoagulants too, now that comes to mind is propolis, bee propolis, honey. I don't eat any of that because I do find, especially bee propolis, there's a video that I put up discussing my experience with bee propolis after I took supplementation for 4 days. My platelets crashed, and it was only after the fact that I looked it up that it was a anticoagulant and slows aggregation of platelets. Okay, so anyways, let me conclude here. Obviously, we're at, I think, a half hour for the video, which is a lot. Typically, I try to keep it short, but in terms of this one, I wanted to really inform those interested with ITP or thrombocytopenia or have that. As to my experience, this was quite a relief, and also knowing that potentially I can bring up my platelets naturally, even though they can be under 20 and under 10 in this case, was a huge relief. At the same time, it wasn't easy. It wasn't just a small endeavor. It was, I took time off for a week. I had to eat a certain way. I had to rest a certain way. I had to sleep a certain way. I didn't do much activity other than I stayed home a lot, and I just made sure that I was resting and that I was feeling calm, and that I was getting the nutrition I needed for platelets to happen. And it seemed to work. So I wish everyone strong platelets. I hope sharing my experience, there's some inspiration there perhaps. The other thing I would say too is, when I first started with my ITP in 2016, those first 2 years, I don't think potentially with a lot of this natural supplementation and food and all these things would have potentially worked for me. I feel like my health has improved so much to this point now, 5 years later, that I think now natural supplementation and diet and doing things naturally, I can bring my numbers up more naturally, because my health overall is a lot better. So keep that also in mind. Like I said initially too, talk with your doctor, talk with your hematologist if you're going to make any changes to your diet or any type of treatment, along if you're taking steroids or any type of pharmaceuticals to help with your condition. You obviously want to make sure that your health is number one, and that you're talking to your doctor and hematologist, because they're professionals and are helping you to make sure that you can handle ITP. But again, I wanted to share my experience. It seems that yes, one can increase platelets naturally, even if they are very, very low. as I've seen to prove it to myself here this past week, where I went from platelet of 9 on April 21st to platelets of 93 on April 27th, a week later. So it's a relief for me. For those out there, I think it's possible, potentially. It'll take time. And one may need to really change a lot of one's lifestyle for that to happen, but it's for the better. Another book I'd like to recommend too, in terms of talking about experience with ITP and thrombocytopenia, is a book by Joanne Young titled Wish by Spirit. Her book was also very inspirational to me. I read that when I first got ITP in June of 2016, and it helped me to see that there's a natural path to improving the condition and to dealing with it, rather than potentially harsh steroids and harsh treatments that obviously are needed when it's very severe, but potentially can be managed naturally down the road later on, so that those harsh medications and treatments don't have a toll on one's health long term that can really be negative and really hurt one's life expectancy and quality of life and things like that. So she was one that inspired me to do it naturally, and I'm seeing the fruits of that. So again, it's Joanne Young, and her book is Wish by Spirit, which I highly recommend if you haven't read it and you have ITP or thrombocytopenia, or know someone or you're helping someone through that. Highly recommended. You can buy it on Amazon or any of the quality bookstores online. Again, Joanne Young, Wish by Spirit. Okay, thank you again, and hoping strong platelets for everyone with ITP and thrombocytopenia, to keep going, be strong, be positive, and naturally it can be done. I'm seeing those things in my life. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.